Welcome back to DeRo and the Diehard. Just me today. Bad weather out, but we're going to get into it. Lots to recap. 18 Champions League games yesterday. And my goodness, it was exhilarating. I mean, plenty of moments to chat about here, but let's just get through the full rundown of what exactly happened on the final day of the Champions League group phase. Obviously, we all know that last year they implemented the new 8-stage group stage, then the preliminary knockout round, and then we finally get into the round of 16. And my goodness, what a day of football it was yesterday. Ups and downs, comebacks, crazy last-minute winners. We're going to get into the whole slew of action. But starting off, let's talk about the teams that qualified in the top 8 that will be exempt from the preliminary knockout round phase. Arsenal finished top of the table. DeRo and I have discussed this team at length and how highly touted we put them. They really, truly are the team to beat right now in Europe, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. They went 8-0 against every team in the Champions League they faced. The second place team, though, ain't no scrub either. Bayern Munich went 7-0-1. They're definitely a lot to contend with. Liverpool, Tottenham, who, last time I checked the EPL standings, they were something 14th or something like that. Now they're 4th in the Champions League table. I mean, the change-up is real, and that is a conversation that has been at the forefront of many people lately, I feel, comparing Champions League football to EPL football, the pace, the physicality, the style even. In 5th, Barcelona, Chelsea in 6th, Sporting Lisbon, Portugal cracking the top 8, and rounding out that 8 is Manchester City. It's a good top 8. There's a few surprises there. Like I said, Tottenham, Sporting Lisbon. It's good to see them back and up and running. And, of course, there's another Portuguese team that slid right in at the very final moment in the last minute, actually, of a game. But let's go on to the following 16. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting because teams are going to play other teams that you would not normally face in a preliminary knockout stage, and especially to look forward to what comes after that if they win their preliminary game. So we have PSG and Newcastle here who either play Monaco or Karabag. That's very, doesn't matter. Pick your poison. I think PSG will make it through. Newcastle is a little bit of a tighter squeeze, but I have faith in them, especially considering that they just drew the French champions and the Champions League holders yesterday. Club Brugge or Galatasaray will either play Juventus or Atletico Madrid. Bit of a mishmash there, but Galatasaray had some very good performances, especially against Liverpool as of late. Bodo Glimt or Benfica will play Real Madrid or Inter Milan. That's interesting. We could see a rematch of the crazy drama that happened yesterday between Madrid and Benfica. Also, let's talk about it. Mourinho's either going to be playing, but he's going to be playing one of his former clubs. I mean, whether it's Madrid or Inter Milan, it's going to happen. Chelsea will play Monaco Karabag, okay, PSG or Newcastle upon completion. Liverpool will play Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Club Brugge, or Galatasaray. Now that is interesting. And I remember, if you can recall yesterday, if you saw the clip, Jamie Carragher always, expressing his disdain about how Liverpool are always drawing tough matchups and Man City always getting the easy ones. Well, not today, my friend, because Man City will either play Real Madrid, Inter Milan, Bodo Glimt, or Benfica. This all, of course, matters who qualifies from the preliminary stage. So if we see some upsets, I mean, City could end up playing Bruges or Galatasaray. Arsenal will play Atalanta, Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund, or Olympiacos. Pretty straightforward. If I was a gunner, I would say I'd be a little worried about Borussia Dortmund, but the way that this team is playing this year, they are a wagon. And then Tottenham will play, they kind of cut the short end of the stick here. They'll play Juve, Atletico, Club Brugge, or Galatasaray. I have no confidence in them against any of those teams, maybe Club Brugge, but Brugge has given a lot of good teams a lot of problems as of late. But now that we have the business aside, let's get down to the highlight of the day. After a crazy back and forth game, Benfica found themselves leading 3-2 versus Real Madrid at home in Portugal. Simple as Benfica needed to win to qualify for the final preliminary knockout round, or so they thought. Marseille, who were ahead of them at this point in the standings, as Benfica were on their way to their victory, they would have surpassed or jumped Marseille. But the goal differential really screwed them over. So as we even further get into the analytics, they were tied on goal differential, and it had to come down to goals conceded. And at this point, Benfica had more goals conceded than Marseille. In the 90 plus 8th minute, Benfica, again, leading 3-2, needing the goal to get to 4-2, to get that last place in the preliminary knockout phase. Real Madrid concede a free kick from about 40 yards out to the right side of about the halfway line, where Frederick Arsens bends a beautiful ball into the box, dangerous, right near the penalty spot, and goalkeeper Anatoly Turbin heads it in past Thibaut Courtois. Benfica win. Benfica qualify against all the odds. Mourinho magic. And it was absolute scenes. Very happy that this team will at least get 2 more games in the Champions League, especially under Jose Mourinho. And what a game it was. A lot's been said about where Mourinho's been headed these last few years. He hasn't exactly achieved the spotlight success, I'll call it. Being in the final of the Champions League, managing Europe's biggest clubs, getting them to where they're supposed to be. He's got the accolades still. He's been coaching Roma. He won their first European title there. He reached that cup final with Tottenham, obviously. He was sacked a few days before that. He had his troubles with Fenerbahce, and as much as these other big profile names like his adversary Pep have been in the spotlight, been at major clubs, been competing for major trophies for the last decade or so, Mourinho has kind of tapered off, and a lot of people say lost the touch, the style is out of date, needs to evolve with the modern era of football. This is great for him. I'd love to see Mourinho have a little bit of a renaissance, and I don't think we're going to get back to the era where you're either going to have the players or the playing style or the environment is right for the playing style to have Mourinho ball like we had before, to even have the autonomy to buy the players that he wanted to get and to have the control over a team. I think that era, as we all know, is well and truly over, but to see Mourinho get back to a spot where he could make a difference, he could cause an upset, is really good. And Benfica, and we already mentioned Sporting Lisbon, these are teams that have a lot of Champions League pedigree. They are institutions in football history for different reasons other than big clubs, right? We always think of Benfica, Sporting, and especially Porto as well, for developing these top-tier talents that other bigger clubs with bigger budgets come and buy, and that's essentially a farm system. But always they seem to do every year well in the Champions League. So very happy for Jose Mourinho, very happy for Benfica. And we have a quote from Jose Mourinho from the post-match he did with CBS, and it's just classic Mourinho magic. I mean, what more is there to say about it? Here's his quote after the game.
Jose, in all your years in football, you have seen and been a part of quite a few things.
I used to say, for me, everything is déjà vu, but this one is the first time.
When it comes to Anatoly Trubin, he's been excellent in goal for you, but of all the chances that were missed tonight...
We knew that he could do it.
When did you know you needed just one goal? When did you look at...
When I make the changes, the last changes, Ivanovic and Antonio Silva, I was told is enough, so let's close the door. When I make the changes a few seconds later, they tell me we need one more goal, but I cannot make more changes. So that was the lucky point to get a free kick that allow us to go there with the big guy.
I found that fantastic. I mean, think about, imagine you don't know you need a goal yet. You put 2 guys on who are defenders, I guess, or have an offensive game plan, and then you find out you need one more, and it's like, my goodness, match ends. But once again, congratulations to Benfica. Just, they were in a tough spot before Mourinho came in. Now they come in. They still have difficult Champions League results with Mourinho. Obviously, him reuniting with Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. But now they're back in, doing well domestically, doing well on the European stage. Before we move on to our next topic, I also want to touch on PSG and Newcastle. Now, for those that didn't watch that game, for me, that was the premier game to watch yesterday. It ended in a 1-1 draw. PSG were dominating. I mean, dominating through the game, a flurry of offensive chances. They never really, they were inches away. Dembele wasn't what we're used to seeing from him last year. And as a result, because of this 1-1 draw, PSG find themselves in the preliminary knockout phase with those 16 teams from 8 to 24. And this is exactly what happened to them last year, right? And they were even worse off. We talked about in our special edition, in our holiday episodes over the break, about how this was at the beginning of the Champions League campaign, PSG were a team that were not looked at as contenders, as they had been way down in the standings. They were given a very hard path to the final, and they went on to win the whole tournament. Not easily, but very handily against certain opponents. Now, the holders of the Champions League, they won 5 trophies last year, made it all the way to the Club World Cup final, could have won a 6th. Now they find themselves in the preliminary knockouts again. And, PSG have a very congested schedule. As we're going to hear in a few sound bites from Vitinha and Luis Enrique, they expect to win everything, and they are in most of their competitions. The 2 extra games, for sure, they do not need. But let's get a little soundbite on manager Luis Enrique on being back in the preliminary knockout stages and having to crawl out and then compete for the title once again.
You did it last year, through the playoffs. Time to do it again?
Of course, that's our mentality, and we have the players to win every trophy. And in that case, I have to say that still one player injured, Quara, and we are not in the best way in that kind of things.
You could tell that he was yelling and screaming the entire match. I mean, his voice is all but gone. Let's hear from the future Portuguese captain, Vitinha, on how it feels to be back in the preliminary knockout stages and to go on to winning the whole tournament, perhaps.
Does mean it's the playoffs once again for PSG, but you managed it last year and still went on to win the competition. But do you feel like you're playing as the European champions right now in terms of the standard you're showing?
Like I said, we have to look to the content of the match. I think so. We did a great match. We controlled. We were the better team. We created a lot of opportunities, and we just couldn't score. Like I said, so we are happy with the performance, not happy with the result, because here in Paris we want every game is to win. We go to the playoffs. It's live. We have to face it, and we'll face it in the best way.
We go to the playoffs. It's life. I feel, as Portuguese myself, an English-speaking Portuguese person it's one of the most identifiable, recognizable accents probably in the world. I mean, you hear it and you're like, oh my God, Ronaldo they all sound so similar to each other, even Mourinho, but he's got a little bit of that fixation on the S's. I'm the special one, we'll play,
I'm European champion. I think I'm a special one.
I think I'm a special one. But yeah, PSG, I wrote about them a lot last year. I focused on them a lot last year in their Champions League run. And I will stand by this. I think this team is a revelation in the modern era of football. I truly think that they play the game the way it's supposed to be played in its most entertaining form. And I'll always root for PSG. But this is a team at the end of the day that is comprised of a lot of young guys, and it's a team that is very different from last year. The main difference being that Gianluigi Donnarumma is not between the posts anymore. And a lot of people, they don't exactly undervalue the goalkeeper, but they definitely underrate the goalkeeper. And that's just simply because big teams with big budgets, you can buy a goalkeeper, a top-end goalkeeper, for about 40 to 50 million pounds or euros. And that is a huge, huge sum for a player, of course, but not in the modern era, right? You think if you're buying a striker, you're going to have to at least spend, if he's top of the market, if he's coming off of a hot season, if he's from a team that's a smaller market, you're going to be paying upwards of 90 million to 100 million pounds or euros. And that's just what it is. So when you think about, to go and get a top goalkeeper is 40 or 50 million pounds, they become indispensable. And that's how they've sort of been treated over the years. The one guy that I've seen in my lifetime, not in my lifetime, at least recently, that is completely indispensable as a player, as a performer, and as a goalkeeper is Gianluigi Donnarumma. PSG being a young team, as I just mentioned, they are prone to give up mistakes. Their style of play incites the other team to get chances. And that's what makes it so fun to watch. What made it so fun to watch last year was that they would give all these high danger chances up to other teams, and Donnarumma would bail them out of everything. World-class saves literally every match in the Champions League. And this year, I'm not saying that there's this gaping hole in net, but they're definitely missing that presence in goal. And I think Donnarumma is a very unique keeper for this generation. He's not known for being good with his feet. He's not known for being overly vocal. He's very stoic, but he's a gamer, and he's very competitive, and he's ice cold. And I think that looking at the sheer stature of the guy, that must invoke some crazy sense of confidence in you as a player, in your back line and as a whole. It definitely gives you the confidence to run forward. So my hope is that even though PSG, they do have a good keeper, they found him in the French league, he's never going to be Donnarumma, because Donnarumma is one of one. We might not see another Donnarumma again. That's how good he is. That's his makeup and his physicality and how he saves the ball and his instincts. I hope that just because they don't have that, sure they have that wall in net, that surefire wall. I hope it doesn't affect how they go forward. I hope it doesn't affect their style of play. I hope that we still see the PSG that we love. And to be fair, against Newcastle, we did. And there were times in the back 10 minutes of that match where PSG needed a win, Newcastle needed the points, where PSG were throwing men forward, throwing all their guys forward. And oftentimes it'd be 3 guys back, 2 guys back, and you have Anthony Gordon, you have Elanga, you have all these guys converging on the counterattack. And if Newcastle were a little more clinical, it could have been a win for them. But nonetheless, very excited for the preliminary knockouts. I'm very excited for a couple of these matches because they are lining up to be heavy hitters out of the gate. And then once you get out of that gate, you're right back into the fire, out of the frying pan and into the fire, as the Hobbit said. It's gonna be fantastic. Let's move on to a situation that has been developing over the last week in the Premier League with West Ham. Fairly sensitive topic. Lucas Paqueta is officially joining Flamengo on a £36.5 million transfer deal. And the overarching theme of this conversation is what went wrong. If you don't know about the Lucas Paqueta situation, he was charged with numerous accounts of gambling and sports betting back in the 2024 season, I believe, and it was linked with intentionally seeking yellow cards. The FA tracked this all the way back to his hometown in Brazil, and this caused him a great deal of mental struggle. He's been on the sidelines for a while. He's been trying to figure out his way back into the fold at West Ham, and it's been a whole situation. And this player who came into West Ham at the time and was, quite frankly, one of the most promising midfielders in England, I remember. And City were linked to him, and he was something that West Ham hadn't had in a long time. This flair, Brazilian, skilled, creative, powerful, big midfielder. And unfortunately now he's going back to his boyhood club in Brazil, which is nothing wrong with that. But let's go through the situation with Paqueta. The charges and allegations, let's go over that first. The FA charged Lucas Paqueta in May of 2024 with intentionally seeking yellow cards in 4 Premier League matches against Leicester, Villa, Leeds, and Bournemouth between 2022 and 2023 to influence the betting markets. The obvious, the cause, I guess, the probable cause they had to go after him were over 250 bets were linked to the case, with many originating from his hometown in Brazil. And this involved a combined stake of over £45,000. The independent commission that was ruling over this case eventually, they found the evidence. It was largely based on circumstantial data, and they found it insufficient to prove spot fixing. There is a lot of FA criticism. The commission heavily criticized the way the FA investigated the situation. They were noting that there was a lack of independent assessment on the betting data. And as we come to the current era where Paquetá is now going back to Brazil. He was acquitted of all the major spot fixing charges, but he was found to have breached FA Rule F3 by failing to comply with investigation requests. There's no appeal from the FA, so essentially the situation just kind of fizzled out, and there's a lot of weird coincidences. Obviously, with the sum of the money being linked to his hometown in Brazil it doesn't look good optically. There were no concrete charges against Paquetá. I remember, just passively watching West Ham and watching social media videos of people hyper-fixating on the fact that Paquetá was getting a yellow card in every match, and I didn't really think much of it. But I guess now we come to the spot here where he's received a lot of criticism. He's quite literally been put through the ringer. He's played and not played, and now we're here. He has been nursing the back injury, but he did also ask to leave for personal reasons, and again, citing the mental toll of the nearly 2-year investigation of the spot fixing charges. In a statement by West Ham, they said that Paquetá wanted to return to Brazil and make a fresh start after 3.5 years with the Hammers. I wish we had DeRo to talk about this, because we've had extensive conversations about how sports gambling and betting has not exactly ruined the sport, because that would just be an over-exaggeration, but it's definitely put a stain on the reputation of football and football players. I mean, it's impossible to ignore. It's a billion-dollar industry, and you're never going to stop it, because people have free will and they have the right to do what they want with their money. But unfortunately, the more you normalize sports gambling within sports, having them as sponsors on your shirt, having them as sponsors in the stadium, having media, right? Have sponsored segments brought to you by this, brought to you by that. The more we normalize it, and again, it's gambling. Gambling is normalized in North American society, and I gather especially in Europe. The more that you're going to get people who play who also like to gamble. And I'm not saying that Lucas Paqueta is guilty. Obviously, he was found innocent. But, we remember that Sandro Tonali got in a lot of trouble. And this is, Nicola Zaniolo also got in a lot of trouble. A lot of Italian players on the team were in a whole bag of trouble. And I think that what more can you expect when it's so normalized? And I just think, I don't think, like I said before, I don't think we can ever take it out of the game and remove it altogether. It brings in too much money, and the sponsorship deals are too vast, and the accessibility is also too easy for it to be completely annulled. But it's a difficult situation for a guy like Paquetá. I always find that a lot of South American players come over to the EPL and they don't fit. Not for their playing style. I think it's more of an attitude thing. I think they love Argentina, they love Brazil, they love Chile, they love Colombia, and they want to go back, because Brazil is, we know Brazil for being a massive footballing nation, and don't get me wrong, him going back to Flamengo, it's a big move. I mean, Flamengo, Brazilian club that we don't really consider a lot of the time, they paid £36.5 million for him to come back. It's a massive sum for a club like that. Massive sum for him. And I just think that, these guys look at it and they say, stadium's packed, passion's off the charts, the league has money, Neymar's back there, I'll be around like-minded individuals playing a like-minded style of football, I'll be away from all of this stuff that happened. If I want to bet, I won't get in trouble. No, I don't know. But it seems to me that, he sort of gave up a little too early, and he's his own man and he can do what he wants, and he knows what's best for him. But I think it's really unfortunate the way the situation played out, because, don't get it wrong. Lucas Paquetá was, for a minute, in the upper echelon of midfielders who could have taken that next step, who you could have looked at. Okay, City have Tijani Reinders right now. That could have been Paquetá better a couple years ago. We'll get back to the quotes here. Lucas made it clear to West Ham that for personal and family reasons, he wishes to return home to Brazil and make a fresh start after being cleared in July 2025 of FA misconduct charges that took nearly 2 years to be resolved, in a situation that he says caused him significant mental strain. West Ham went on to say that despite the club doing everything possible to persuade Lucas to stay, he has remained adamant that his wish is to leave. Therefore, the head coach and the club have reluctantly agreed to accept his transfer request. West Ham United would like to take this opportunity to thank our management, players, staff, and loyal supporters for the unwavering and devoted support they have shown to Lucas throughout his time at the club, and in particular over the last 2.5 years. Club will make no further comment at this time. Let's go to the press conference that Nuno Espirito Santos recently had, where he discussed the issue. Here's the first quote.
Lucas Paqueta, I know last week you said, look, we've got to try and find a solution to the situation.
Yeah, the situation is the same. It's the same as last week. We hope that the club and Lucas find a solution. You know my opinion about Lucas. It's already been said in this room. But for this game against Sunderland, he's not going to be in the squad.
He's not. He's still.
No, he's not going to be in the squad.
Is there a timeline? Is that the?
We have to deal day by day. We have to deal with the Lucas situation day by day.
We'll move right along with the second quote from West Ham manager Nuno Espirito Santos.
And how's he feeling mentally right now?
Yeah, all the things that happened in the past has created so many problems individually. Now that it's finished, like I said, I hope Lucas and the club find a solution so we can move forward from that issue.
It's a sad situation, and I think, like I said before, it's hard to shield these players from themselves when it comes to sports gambling. But I don't know what to think, and I don't want to assume anything about Lucas Paqueta. I don't want to sit here and say that he's guilty and he's fleeing back to Brazil. I think that would be crazy. But, you know, it's a multifaceted issue that has to do with mental health. It has to do with a lot of adversity from fans and a lot of shtick he took from fans and from the FA especially, who really took him around the ringer or through the ringer. And then it has to do with, you know, some players, maybe Paquetá belongs to the group, they can't kick it in the Prem. They can't kick it in Europe, or they simply don't want to. And for them, the mecca of football is back home in Brazil, is back home in Argentina. All luck to Lucas Paquetá. I wish him nothing but success, and I hope that he can get over this hurdle and leave all of this stuff behind him in the past. Speaking of the Premier League, let's go a little bit into a couple of figures that I would like to discuss, and I think it's important, speaking of money as well, that we make these few comparisons here because they really are astounding. Now, recently, Raheem Sterling and Chelsea, they've parted ways. Chelsea have terminated his contract, which was, by the way, one of the most high-paid contracts in the EPL. I mean, he hasn't played a minute of football this year, barely played last year, and this contract would go until 2027. So we're going to go through some of the examples of how the Premier League money is astonishing. And maybe it's because they track it by week. You know, in North America, we're kind of used to mega contracts, and especially in the NBA, who athletes are getting upwards of $70 million a year. I mean, there's only, 20 by 2030, they'll be getting, I guess it would be $100 million a year. That's a distinct possibility. But here are some names that I found particularly insane. And they're getting paid. Some of the top paid players in the Prem right now. On first, I had Calvin Phillips. Now, you remember Calvin Phillips was the talk of the town, as the English do. He was an English defensive midfielder who played for Leeds. Bought out by Man City. And he signed a contract there where he gets £150,000 per week. He's had 2 EPL starts since signing for City in 2022. I think I underhyped the hype around Calvin Phillips. I mean, he was the talk of the town in England, internationally. This is the next that. That's what the conversation was with Calvin Phillips. And there were rumors, there were reports as well, that he just could not stay in shape. He could not lock in and be the guy he was supposed to be. And, at this point, raking in 150,000 pounds a week, why would you? And that's a conversation that we're going to get to at the end of this. The next one, we have Federico Chiesa, 150,000 pounds a week as well. My notes under this one, I have this one is crazy. Shocking. I used to watch every single Juve game about 3 to 4 years ago. And in that time, it's when Chiesa came from Fiorentina alongside Ronaldo in his last full year there. And it was Ronaldo and Chiesa leading that line. And I remember thinking, wow, Italy finally have a really good attacker who can develop into something more for the first time in a long time. Italy's attack has not been good at all. And Chiesa has had his moments. He had his moments with Juve, and he had his moments with the national team in their Euro run. But let's be clear here. Ronaldo leaves Juve, Chiesa falls off a cliff. Chiesa garners interest from this club, from that club. For whatever reason, Liverpool think they need more attackers and they sign him. And he has one moment I can recall where he scored a late goal to tie the game. I don't even know. That's how anonymous he's been in his career. Chiesa had the potential to be something just like Calvin Phillips. He had the potential to be something very, very good. And I don't want to say he pissed it away because that just wouldn't be true. But I think he was just never that good. I think he was playing out of his skull for a year and things kind of evened out. The next one I have here is Gabriel Jesus at 265,000 pounds per week. What are we talking about here, guys? He's out with injury all the time, since joining Arsenal especially, and he's only scored, I think, 20 goals in 78 appearances for Arsenal, something like that. At least that was the accurate stat before yesterday. 265,000 pounds a week. What is that, $480,000 a week? For what? Tell me something that Gabriel Jesus does better than anybody else. The answer is nothing. Actually, he gets injured better than everybody else. But, like Jamie Carragher said, who's Arsenal's world-class attacker? I don't think Bukayo Saka is world-class anymore. He's got 1 goal in 13 matches in the Prem. But you tell me. But Gabriel Jesus, for the money that he's getting paid, let's be frank here, undeserving. The next one is still crazy, and I don't have anything underneath it. It's Jadon Sancho is at 250,000 pounds a week. Now, Jadon Sancho also simultaneously is an interesting topic because he came from Borussia and he was electric in the Bundesliga, electric for Borussia. He came to United, and as many players realize when they come to United, the grass ain't always greener, and sometimes it's quicksand. And Jadon Sancho got sucked into the quicksand, and then it had a break, and it spit him out. And since then, he's gone back to Borussia. I think he's at Aston Villa right now. It's a mess. Still, he's riding the high of that 250,000 pounds per week. Was he ever worth it in the beginning? Maybe. The hype around him was very good. And let's not forget that I think in the 2021 season when he came, he was unbelievable. Or maybe 2022. He was unbelievable. The next one I have, who's the second highest paid player on this list, is Raheem Sterling. Now, like I said before, Raheem Sterling and Chelsea have parted ways. They've terminated his contract. He hasn't played a single minute of Premier League football this year, barely touched the field last year, and the deal that he's currently on or was until 2027. So he would still have a full year and a half to go on the deal. 325,000 pounds per week.
We'll have a look. Of course we'll have a look. Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
You're joking. You're joking. I mean, for a while there, Sterling was a mainstay in the City team, mainstay Premier League good player. I will never, ever bend to this English narrative of him being cream of the crop and top class or world class. I've seen him miss far too many sitters for my opinion to ever change. But £325,000 a week is criminal robbery. And essentially, the last 2 years, he's sat on his ass and raked it in. That is a lot of money. The last one, I say it, it's in a bittersweet manner. It's Casemiro, £350,000 per week. United have announced that he will be leaving the club the end of this year. Just like you'll never see me overrate Sterling, you'll never see me criticize Casemiro too harshly. Casemiro was a very underrated defensive midfielder for a long time in those Madrid teams and a very key part of those Madrid teams. He brought something that only one other guy in that team brought in Marcelo, and that was a little bit of flair and uncertainty. A little bit of, I'm going to volley this ball from 38 yards out and pin it in the top corner. And he's done it in Champions League final, and he's done it everywhere else he's gone. But at his age, the way he moves, the way the Premier League is, £350,000 a week is a little bit much. But speaking of the Premier League, now, before we end off this show, because we are raking up the time here, there's been a discussion about recently, as certain teams do well in the Champions League and certain teams do poorly in the Premier League, i.e. Tottenham, there's been a real conversation about what's the difference between playing in England versus playing on the European stage, playing English opposition versus playing European opposition from Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, wherever. And this also plays into the narrative how England is here and everybody else is down here, which is something I happen to partially agree with. I think the Premier League has been the best league in the world for about 5 years now. I think that'd be safe to say. 4 or 5 years. And this is normal, right? Like, how long was Serie A the top of the table? You can make a case for the 80s. They were superior in the 90s, superior in the early 2000s. And then we saw the shift to La Liga, where it was Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico. And then we sort of saw this changing of the guard in the late 20-teens, where it went to the Prem. This happens. It comes in ebbs and flows. One day the Premier League might not be as good, likely will not be as good. The only problem is now is that the financial figures that we're seeing in the Prem are so vastly larger than the other leagues that seeing the end is kind of, it's vague. You can't really spot where this is going to taper off and eventually stop. And I think that plays into one thing. And again, before I want to preface this, I think England's the best in the world. I don't think English players are best in the world. I don't think English players can translate to other leagues at all. And number one example is that this past week, Trent Alexander-Arnold was informed by Alvaro Arbeloa, now head coach or manager of Real Madrid, that he's not in his plans. You haven't played enough. You're not good enough. Not my style. Not in my plans. And that's the one of latest examples. There are oddities like Harry Kane, like Owen Hargreaves, right? But for me, I've never really seen an English player go overseas and excel to a point where they're in a conversation for the Ballon d'Or, where they're in a conversation for the best whatever they are in the world. And that's one thing. But the Premier League is the best league in the world. They have the most money. They gather the biggest names, usually. And it's the highest watched league. It's probably the most entertaining league in the world. Now, there's a multitude of reasons for this. How do we define the best league in the world? Does it consist of the best teams? Well, according to the UEFA coefficients, it does. Okay, what's the next one? Do they have the best playing style? Do the teams have the best playing style? Okay, well, on one hand, you have Pep, who we know what he does. He's revolutionized the game. There's no need to delve further into that. That's one playing style. Then you have Arne Slot, which is another playing style that worked and hasn't worked, and it's been up and down. Then you got the new guy, Chelsea Rosselló, who's got this new wave idea of looking at football, but it's still very, very interesting. the Eddie Howes of the world that play a very certain specific brand of football that is compatible with the Prem, hard to translate outside of it. And I think that playing style-wise, the Prem is faster. It is more physical. There are more goals. That's also why people watch it. But the term best, right, is a bottom table matchup between two English sides better than watching the bottom table matchup versus two Italian sides? Well, absolutely it is. But who has the better quality of football? And I think that is completely a subjective argument that people have. It really looks bad on the rest of Europe when a team like Tottenham can go from 14th in the Prem to 4th in the Champions League. And I think there are a multitude of reasons why they're at 4th versus 14th. I think the opposition has a big part to play in it. And I think form. I think right time, right place, just the right day, and they showed up. But this notion that the quality of leagues there's such a huge disparity, I think, is a little bit of a fallacy. There's a lot of quality in Spain. There's a lot of quality in Italy. Italy, I will say, is kind of going down the tubes a little bit. Not necessarily like a crisis mode, but the gap between England, Spain, and then Italy is growing. I love how there's an English team is always the best in Europe until they don't win the Champions League. And that was a narrative with Liverpool for a long time. Sorry, Liverpool fans. But I just think that it's a conversation because of the Tottenham example. I think you have to take it with context, right? It is a more entertaining game to watch. If I were to have somebody over and show them soccer for the first time, and I had the option on a weekend of all the top 5 leagues, I would look for a Premier League matchup for sure. And then for somebody who's more of an enthusiast, I would maybe switch over to the Italian side or the Spanish side. It's all subjective. But the Premier League is by far and away, especially we can see with these salary figures here, leading the way in almost every category. And eventually we're going to get to the conversation where we have to ask the question, is it a problem? Is this sustainable? Before we end off the show, we'll just touch on the Super League that everybody was worried about, that had the top 6 in the Prem, and it had Real Madrid, Barcelona. Didn't have the German teams because obviously they're 50-50 ownership with the fans as well, or public ownership. But people were within the hour outside of Old Trafford, Stamford Bridge, the Etihad, wherever, protesting, and as they should, because that would be horrible for the game. But in a way, as a lot of people have been talking about over the last few months, it kind of feels that the English Premier League is just the English Super League. They make significantly more. They can spend significantly more. I mean, think about it past this summer. Liverpool, a team that we never really considered that had the funds to do what they did, went out and spent £450 million. It's $1 billion. Like, almost $1 billion. These are things that normally in the history of the sport wouldn't happen. And simultaneously, when you have these clubs with more money, more spotlight, more ad deals, more ad space, and more opportunity to grow, and you have a generation of players who only, I'll say this loosely, only care about the money, it's going to be a natural fit. And that's what makes it harder for teams that aren't Real Madrid, Barcelona, or Bayern to attract players to their club to play for the badge. Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode of DeRo the Diehard. We'll be back next Friday with the best football podcast north of the border and with my co-host, Dwayne De Rosario. We'll see you then. Enjoy the weekend, watch some footy, and love the beautiful game.